Hey, thank you so much for checking out this episode of Just Two Guys Media, where we uncover our favorite Ozzy albums. One quick thing I want to get before I get to the content is, hey, this is our first video. We had never done this before as far as a roundtable setting, and there were a couple hiccups, as you can imagine. We had some issues with the audio. Obviously, there's a little bit of video here and there that's not 100% either. Just want to let you know that that is not the norm. We did get some of that ironed out, and it will be a lot better in the future. So again, just apologies. I appreciate you bearing with us through that as we kind of go through these first stage hiccups as we learn and grow. And for the next few videos we have, it'll be a lot better. So enjoy the content, guys, and if you like it, please like and subscribe. We really appreciate it. We enjoyed doing this. We spent weeks listening to Ozzy and really diving into his songs just to make this list for you. So I hope you enjoy it. Hey, welcome to the channel. This is Just Two Guys.
Just two
guys Media. I added the media in case there's a copyright claim. I don't know if there will be or not. It's hard to tell nowadays. So, all right. So listen, we're new to this. This is new, and we are going to be doing a lot of things on this channel. A lot. But one of the main things I've always wanted to do from a YouTuber, podcast, vlog standpoint is I wanted to do music studies. Essentially, we go through, find an artist we really like, or maybe we don't like, but someone likes, maybe it's requested, listen to all their albums from a different point of view. The different point of view being we're not huge fans.
I'm in my mid to late 50s. That's one, and he's in his early 30s. So that's one different view.
Right.
And then not exactly being your choice of genre necessarily. This is, the very first one we're doing is going to be a hard rock from the early 80s all the way up to
Some would call it metal.
Some would call it metal.
Yeah, the beginning of metal. But then that's a great point. The other perspective being that, music has a lot to do with nostalgia. When you grow up with an album or with someone, you like that certain style they do, whereas if you've never listened to somebody and then all of a sudden you go to listen to them, it's completely different. You're going to look at it through a completely different lens. And everyone does that. That's not like some people do, some people don't. Everyone has albums they listened to when they were young, and they're like, oh, I love these albums, and they spend the whole rest of their lives going, oh, remember when that band sounded like that? Oh, it was so great. I wish they would go back to sounding like that, even though that band is now 50, 60 years old, and God knows what else. So,
but some of them have continued to pump out some pretty good music.
No, hold on. Is it still recording? Okay, it is. Hey, that's weird. It went to... there's going to be hiccups during the first couple. It went to, like, the screensaver mode, but it was still recording, so we're good. All right, so listen, we're doing Ozzy. We're doing Ozzy mainly because Chuck over here is a huge Ozzy fan, very big Ozzy fan. Plus Ozzy, some would make a very convincing argument that he created metal. Because 1969 with
Black Sabbath,
obviously. 69 there was nothing coming out like that, so a lot of people would contribute to that being metal. And then even when he went in the 80s, metal still hadn't really caught on yet, and he's still but not a lot.
One was still, AC/DC was rocking pretty hard by then,
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call AC/DC metal per se, but it's close. It's about as close. At that point in time, maybe, but yeah, nowadays I would consider it just hard rock. But so Ozzy has a very big track record. He has made music all throughout the year. It's a God-given miracle the man is alive. There's no... I've seen people get killed for a lot less.
The drugs alone amaze me. God bless you, Ozzy. I love you, man. I'd do anything for you. And if you see my channel, send me a shout out. Jack, Kelly, love you too. Sharon, come on. Listen, he's so great. Everything about him. Except you can't understand him when he talks. But when he sings, you understand every word. It's just...
He's by far. There's a couple small cases of that, but I've never seen anybody talk as bad as he do, but then sing as well as he does.
Yeah.
And I don't get that. I really don't. I don't understand the idea that you can talk so bad that people can't understand you, and then you can sing so nice that you're on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. You know what I mean? It doesn't. It's crazy.
I believe there was a man by the name of Mel Tillis that had a really bad stuttering problem, but he could sing.
Oh, yeah.
And when he sang, he didn't stutter.
But you just sing everything.
And so then he was pretty much, He did get through the stuttering problem, I believe, later on, but it was for a long time. All he could get the words out was to sing.
Wow. All right, so we're starting with Ozzy. We've spent the last 2.5, 3 weeks listening to Ozzy, every album from front to back. I had never heard an Ozzy album before this from front to back. I've, of course, heard his greatest hits. I've heard, songs on the radio. I'm aware. I've even seen him live in concert with Black Sabbath once. So, I'm aware, just never had listened to an album fully from front to back. So my perspective is definitely going to be, if you're an Ozzy fan who grew up with him, it's not going to be there. I imagine based on our conversations, we try not to talk a lot before we get to this table, but based on what I've heard, you'd heard like half of it basically from front to back, probably.
At least, yeah.
Yeah, and then other songs you hadn't listened to the B-sides.
There was a lot of them. I probably heard 75% or 80% of the songs, but there were some B-sides that I hadn't listened to, and some of the newer stuff that I just hadn't gotten to yet.
Right.
But I've listened to all of it now.
All of it now, and it was quite fun. So my list, I can't speak for him because I don't know. If you're an Ozzy fan, there's going to be some stuff on my list that you are going to be very upset and you're probably going to attack in the comments, and that's okay. That's what this is for. So,
you may be disappointed in my list too.
Yeah, maybe. So we'll see.
Opinion,
there's 13 studio albums. We go by studio albums. We don't go by mixtapes or underground anything. We're not including any of the Black Sabbath stuff. This is just Ozzy's solo career. Yeah. If we added the other 12 Black Sabbath albums, it would be ridiculous.
This was hard enough with these 13.
It was very hard.
There was only one that was fairly easy for me. The other 12 were just immensely hard.
Right, for sure. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start with 13. You go first here. I'll let you start with 13. What is your worst Ozzy album?
I don't know if I like using the worst word, but I would have to say of the 13 studio albums, Undercover is probably my least favorite.
Yeah.
Some of the writers of the music are fantastic. Joe Walsh, come on. You got John Lennon, you've got David Bowie, you've got Paul McCartney, you've got Mick Jagger, you've got Eric Clapton. There's some really big names on the writers. But this is where he's covered other people's music. Mm-hmm. And I thought, when I first started listening to this, I listened to Rocky Mountain Way, and I thought, man, that's a Joe Walsh tune. I really liked the way he covered that. I enjoyed that cover. I really did. And I thought, this might be pretty good. The next song was the Beatles, In My Life. Yeah, In My Life.
Yeah, which is a beautiful
Lennon
song.
McCartney, and it's just the Beatles are so iconic that I couldn't get the Beatles medley out of my head.
Yeah.
And sorry, Ozzy, nothing against you, but don't cover the Beatles.
It's not meant to be it's not really meant to be a hard rock song. Like In My Life is such a mellow tune about reflecting on life. About something that every single person on this world can relate to, which is basically having people in your life that you remember, and they just come and go so short, but you always remember them, and there's just so many people like that. It just doesn't work as a hard rock song, and it was excruciating for me to try to get through that particular track.
So Rocky Mountain Way, Mississippi Queen, there were 3 or 4 for what it's all worth, wasn't bad. So there were several that were decent, and that I might listen to again.
Right.
But then there's several that I would not want to listen to again.
Yeah.
So that's why it hit last place for me.
Right. Okay.
So.
I agree with you completely. I kind of told you from the rip. Again, we try not to talk during this, but I had such a strong feeling about it. It's like as I was listening to the albums, I was making all these notes, but when I got to Undercover, I made it through one time, and it was physically hard to make it through the album for me, just because a lot of it covers are tricky because, when you do covers, they have to basically take an old song that is really good. The great ones do songs that are just okay, and they try to turn them good. That's what makes them good. But when you take classic songs that we've heard 700 times, that are great songs, and you try to put your own spin on them, you know,
I mean, you got to make it your own to make it
a cover.
To cover, yeah.
But the problem is that some are going to hit,
some of those
okay,
you can't do.
Yeah, and some of them it just really ties it up. And I never got behind it. It didn't feel like there was a lot of effort into it. It felt like there was sometimes it was just a jam session. Like he was just sitting in the studio, like, hey, let's cover this song, and they just started playing it the best they could, and they just kind of did it in one take. Is how it felt. So yeah, it's my last two. I honestly, it was the only album I can say that I probably won't listen to again. Any of the other ones, other 12 we've done, I'd probably be okay listening to them again. But not Undercover can stay where it's at. Undercover.
So for me, the next 4 or 5,
really tough.
Kind of interchangeable.
Yeah, depending on the day. I feel that for sure.
Yeah.
So what do you have right now at this moment for your number 12?
Down to Earth.
Oh, okay. Oh no.
Well. I know. Hold on here.
I can't wait to hear this.
Well,
that's all right. No, go ahead. Tell your opinion. Stick with it.
So it's got some great songs on it. Mm-hmm. I mean, Gets Me Through, Dreamer, No Easy Way Out. I mean, the list goes on and on. Mm-hmm. And it's not a bad album. It's a really good album. But the problem is the next 12 that we're going to list are very good albums, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, this is just the next one on my list today. And tomorrow I may think something different. That's how interchangeable some of these are. I mean, they're just, it's in no way a bad album, not at all. I mean, it's awesome. It's a great album. It's just there's so many other great ones also. What? Sorry, Ozzy.
Well, actually,
I can't put all of number one. That's what I would probably do is put all of number one.
I would say you're more along with the mainstream. I think the majority of people do not. I think they have that pretty toward the bottom. So it's actually pretty. I think you're right in line with what most Ozzy people think. If you look at Ranker or anything else, so I think you're good there.
I didn't look. Just so everybody knows. I didn't look at rankings from anybody, anywhere, anytime. This is my list, my way, my listening. It's 100% me. So if there's an issue with it, your issue's with me. But remember, this is just my opinion. I'm just one of the two guys. What was yours?
Okay, so number 12 for me is Patient Number 9.
Oh!
Yeah, Patient Number 9. So I feel like Ozzy for the last 10 years, 15 years, went a new direction with his music. And he went a little further into it every time, and then he got to Ordinary Man, and it was a complete change of sound. And I think there was a lot of negative feedback from it, mainly from the old Ozzy fans who were expecting his old self, 80s hair band. And so what happened was it felt like on Patient Number 9, he tried to go back to that a little bit, back to a classic Ozzy. And for me, unfortunately, at 71 years old or however old he is now, classic Ozzy just doesn't have the same ring to it as it used to. You know, when you're hopped up on all kinds of drugs and partying and having a great time, metal's really, a lot easier to do, to be honest with you. But now that you're old and you're going on field trips with your son, which is awesome, it just doesn't have the same ring to it. And I found a lot of the tracks to be just kind of boring and bland. Now, I will say there is a couple really good ones on there. The one it starts out with, the name eludes me at the moment, but the first opening track is really, really good.
Patient Number 9.
And that's what it is. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So there's one more toward the end that's really good too. But then that's about it. It's not.
Let's see, and I disagree with that. But yeah, I think there's several more really good tracks on there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so mine is rated a little higher than that.
Yeah, for sure. Hey. Well, all right, so number 11. What is your number 11?
This is going to really piss some people off. Sorry. My number 11 is Bark at the Moon.
Really?
Yeah. And again, it's an outstanding album.
Right.
It's great. It's a great album.
Right.
But he's got so many great albums. Yeah. It was really hard for me. There's other ones I'd rather listen to. And that's the way
the sound change too. That's when
I love all of Ozzy's albums, with the exception of Undercover. But I don't know. Something had to be in the number 11 slot.
Most people have that one about third or fourth, and I would say I don't. I'll be honest with you, I don't have it that high either. For me, that's when the sound really did change because, the first two albums are very, very guitar heavy because of I think Rhodes, right? Am I getting his? Yeah. So Rhodes was extremely talented, and it was very obvious that Ozzy basically put the whole front of everything on him and said, "Listen, drums and bass kind of irrelevant, just shred." And so those first two albums are him shredding. Well, then when he's not there at Bark of the Moon, it's kind of the same format, but it's a different guitarist and it doesn't sound the same. And so it is a little different for sure.
We should definitely mention some of the songs. Bark at the Moon, awesome song. You're No Different is one of my favorite Ozzy songs of all time. Rock and Roll Rebel, outstanding. There's no bad songs on the album.
Rock and Roll Rebel is good, yeah.
I don't think there's anything that I wouldn't listen to. I mean, that's an album I'll put in and listen to for sure.
Yeah. All right. So my number 11 is Scream. Now you're right. When you say that there's interchangeable ones here, this is one that could be interchanged with 10, 9, 12 even Patient Number 9 isn't locked in at 12, to be honest with you. These are all, but for me, Scream, it has some really heavy metal tracks on it. I really like that. However, most of the songs for me, as far as, I guess from a creative standpoint, don't really go too in depth. It felt like it was kind of rushed a little bit. It's still a good album. I love listening to it. I would gladly listen to it again. But I think there's only really one or two bangers on it for me. And with that being that low, it's interchangeable in any of my bottom half. Anything I would say from 8 to 12, I would say is interchangeable for me, depending on the day. But right now, Scream would be my number 11. Based on that.
We definitely don't see eye to eye on that. And that's okay.
All right, so then what's your number 10?
Okay, my number 10 is, I'm going way outside the box. I'm just kidding. It's Patient Number 9. Okay. I agree with you.
Yeah.
So we weren't that off. A couple little things, yeah. I do think there's a few more gems in there for sure. And I've listened to the album multiple times and will continue to. I like it. Parasite, Zakk Wylde, 1,000 Shades with Jeff Beck. Eric Clapton was on one of those days. I mean, I thought it was really cool that he really kind of shared it and got to work with people that he might not normally work with. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really neat.
I did think that was cool. Yeah, I did think that part was cool for sure. Okay, so my number 10 is going to be Black Rain. Honestly, again, 10 and 11, now that I'm even thinking about it here at the table, they could be switched. A lot of new metal, a lot more heavier sounding full body guitar. Zakk Wylde developed that through the 90s late, and then, now in the early 2000s, and now even today, it's a very clean guitar. It's very clean at this point. It's very heavy. I like that. There's some new metal. There's just, again, you've got 2 or 3 bangers, and then you've got some good tracks, and then you've got some okay tracks, and overall it's a good album. Would listen to it again for sure, but just nothing that really grabbed me enough to say, hey, this is top tier list. This is just
I would say very good album, and I would say 5 or 6 nails and 4 or 5, 3 or 4, But I'm with you. I would listen to this again. So
yeah.
And all that happens to be my number 9.
Oh, okay. So number 9,
so you're 10, I'm 9. So it's right
very
in there,
close. Okay.
So
Yeah.
All right. No, I don't think so. It speaks for itself. It's a good album. Mm-hmm. It's, like you said, those, for me, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 are kind of interchangeable in a way, So
yeah, for sure. Okay. So number 9 for you is. Oh, that's right. Black Rain. Okay. So number 9 for me. Now, this is going to be the one that really is going to trigger some people, which actually it's really funny because I thought I would trigger somebody harsh before you did. And I think when you said Bark at the Moon, that by far was the biggest surprise. I don't have a surprise that big.
Okay.
Mine, however, number 9 is going to be Ultimate Sin. Yeah, Ultimate Sin. So this is a personal preference thing. But when those albums in the mid 80s, and Bark at the Moon's no exception, but I thought the songwriting was phenomenal on it. But you get after that Ultimate Sin, and then you get No Rest for the Wicked. Those feel very 80s hair band, very 80s hair band, which is I'm not a fan of. I never have been. The tracks almost blend together so well that if you were to ask me songs, say, hey, what album, what album is this song off of? I wouldn't know if it was Bark at the Moon, Ultimate Sin, or No Rest for the Wicked, because they all sound kind of similar in a way. They all have the very same similar style. I'm not a fan of the guitarist that was there for Bark at the Moon or the Ultimate Sin. I think he was the Rat guitarist, I believe. I forget his name, but he was for Rat. Never liked that sound of guitar. It's very 80s hair band, and it's just not for me. And although it's not a bad album, you really have to really have an affection for metal music, and you have to have an affection for hair band, I think, 80s specifically, to really dig that album. And since I don't, I think it just falls flat for me.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So, all right.
Well, my number eight is going to be one that we've already heard on your list, I believe. It was Scream.
Okay. Yep.
And I think it was a decent album. I think he is going through a change during that, which is good, you know. Definitely has some hits. I mean, I would definitely listen to it again. Again, Ozzy, you don't have any bad albums. None. Zero zilch.
Except Undercover.
Undercover's not a bad album. It's just there's not a whole lot of great. Okay, Ozzy, it's not my favorite. It's just not my favorite. You know. Anyway.
Look, he's put out 13 solo albums. They can't all be perfect.
Oh, right. Right.
One's got to be bad. Hey, come on.
So I mean, Scream is where I'm at on number 8, and I mean, it definitely has some great tracks, and it had some that left me wanting a little bit more.
Right. Yeah, agreed. Okay.
So,
number 8, no surprise here for me, but it's No Rest for the Wicked. I just talked about how it kind of blended with Ultimate Sin. Again, not a bad album, but it just kind of... There was one particular track on Ultimate Sin. I think it's Castles. What Castles Are Burning? What's the actual name of that song?
Fire in the Sky.
Fire in the Sky. Okay, Fire in the Sky. So I really do love that. That's an absolute timeless banger. So that's why it got pushed to the front of that for everything, because it's amazing. And there's also a couple other ones I really like. But again, there's a lot of tracks on that album that if you were to say, hey, what's that from? I might guess Ultimate Sin, because it blends so well. It almost felt like Ultimate Sin and No Rest for the Wicked could have been a double album almost, because it really, I mean, I know they were like 4 or 5 years apart, but they actually feel pretty similar in a way. They could have been a double album. So, but I did like Ultimate Sin a little bit better, so I put it ahead. So
my number 7 is Ultimate Sin.
Okay. I thought it'd be a little higher than that, so I'm surprised.
Well,
okay.
This is I had it a lot higher than that, and then I backed it off, and I'm not sure why. But anyway, I mean, that's another one of those albums I absolutely love, and I've listened to it over and over and over, probably 100 times easy, and they're all great. How do you know? Yeah. And that's my problem, is we probably should have done somebody that had some really crappy songs. Would have been easier. But, so, I mean, Ultimate Sin, that's where I'm at.
Okay. All right. So we're on number 7 now. My number 7, I gave it to Ordinary Man. I thought Ozzy did a great job of mixing up his style here, which I know is not easy to do. A lot of artists are really scared to venture outside their comfort zone because they're afraid of how the fans are going to think, which there were fans, some heavy Ozzy fans that basically did not like this album because it had some pop songs on it. It was completely new. It changed everything. But the thing is, I've heard a lot of artists try to switch genres, and this actually isn't that bad of an effort, to be honest with you. He does a pretty good job of innovating, going on tracks with Post Malone and stuff, is trying to stay relevant, which you have to do. You can call him a sellout if you want, but the point is he has to stay relevant, and the songs are fire. They caught the Billboard, charts. And there's just a lot of stuff on that album that's really different that he tries, using sounds and using noises and really, giving bass line, the feel. And there's just a lot he did. And I gave him credit for it. And so I had it a little higher than most people probably would. But I know how hard that is to do. And I thought he did it really well.
We'll talk about it again.
Okay, yeah, we'll talk about it again in a moment. So.
Yeah.
So we'll just leave that out for now. So that's my number 7. So now number 6, we're getting this. Everything from this point on is in the top half of his album. So this is all good stuff.
The top half. And again, some of these are interchangeable with each other again. So the top half and the bottom half, a little bit on the interchangeable side. Okay. I'm going to get some hate mail on this one. Diary of a Madman is my number 6. And Diary was an awesome album, and I will continue to listen to it. Flying High Again and Over the Mountain, and just Diary of a Madman. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're just all awesome. And of course, Randy Rhoads shreds the guitar on all of them, and it's just, it should be higher.
It's so tough. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, that's my number 6.
My number 6, I'm going to go right there with you. My number 6 is Down to Earth. I really liked that album. I know a lot of people did not. I thought it had an extremely awesome early 2000s metal sound to it. I thought Ozzy and it's Wilds. Is it that the guitarist Wilds?
Zach Wild.
Zach Wild. Okay, well, I didn't know if it was Wilds or Wild. Zach Wild by that point had really got it down and changed. I mean, they changed their sound to get more heavyish metal. They did that in the 90s as well, but then able to switch to the 2000s, it came across a lot cleaner. I thought, again, he tried some new stuff that Ozzy had never done before, using different instruments opposed to just being so heavy on guitar. And I gave him a lot of credit for it. And honestly, there's just a lot of heavy, great songs that I would like to listen to again. I would definitely want to listen to again and dive further into them. So with that, it was definitely, and it was hard because these, 6, and to be honest with you, 6, 5, and 4, it's tough here because you're getting down to the nitty gritty. Small details are changing whether an album is 5th or 6th. And even after you said Diary of a Madman, I don't disagree with anything you said. I think Diary of a Madman is a little overrated only because every list I saw had it at 1 or 2. It was 1 or 2. Yeah. There was no other, I saw like my first 3 list, it was number 2. And then I found a couple that it was number 1. And so I'm like, gosh, I just don't know if it's my favorite album. We'll get to that in a second more. But yeah, Down to Earth I thought was really good. These are really interchangeable. But it's tough. It's tough at this point. But I don't disagree with anything that you said with Diary of a Madman either.
Yeah.
So now getting into the top 5, what do you have as your number 5?
I have No More Tears. And that album could be number 1 at any. I mean, it's just one of those that I've burned a hole in the CDs listening to them. So that's probably the one I've listened to more than any other ones. And it's got just so many killer tracks. There's only 2 that I just think are okay. Everything else I think is a smash. So Road to Nowhere, one of my favorite songs. Mr. Tinker Train, I Don't Want to Change the World. I could go through all of them.
So many
and
bangers.
Literally list every song on the album is just. Anyway, so that's why it's my number 5.
Okay. Number 5 for me is actually Bark at the Moon. After, to be honest with you, after hearing everything you said, if I was like just listening to albums, I would probably listen to some of these other ones before I listened to Bark at the Moon. But I do understand that Bark at the Moon had some social impact, as far as the music video for Bark at the Moon itself. It was still a very well-written album from front to back. It really, had a lot of shredding songs. It was still very guitar heavy, which I think actually hurt it because I think the fact that it was a different guitarist, it just, it's so hard to turn a whole band over to a guitarist and say, hey, you carry us, and it just, it didn't work, but it's still a great album. People love it. Still has that kind of early hair band, but not quite to the point where it got to the middle there. But yeah, still a great album.
Hey, my number 4 is Ordinary Man.
Okay.
And I put it that high. It's a really interesting album to me. And it may have to do with my age and my health situations and things. But I really believe that this album, Ozzy really was thinking about his own mortality a lot during the writing of these songs, and they really All My Life, Ordinary Man, Goodbye, Under the. There's just so many of them that I think have to do with the mortality, the death, and living life. And he's always been so great at singing that type of songs.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, it was a real big turning point. He tried a lot of new stuff. And a lot, the thing is, I had mentioned it at the beginning of the video about how if you're just an Ozzy fan from the beginning, a lot of the time you chase that Ozzy sound that he always had. And so something new will come out and you just don't give it a fair shot because...
I really enjoyed the Take What You Want with Post Malone. And that, it was more of a crossover, I think, than anything. And
it was.
I don't know, trying new things. You got to grow or die.
Yeah.
Yeah. And nobody's ready for Ozzy to die yet. So keep hanging around there, Ozzy. Keep kicking ass and taking names.
Right. Yeah. Well, and Post Malone at the time, you may not know much about Post Malone, but at the time he was blowing up. He had just come out, I think, with really his first big album, Bentleys and Beer Bongs, and. He was very popular. He's a very well-known R&B hip-hop artist who made it on the radio quite a bit, had quite a few #1 hits and top fives. And so the timing was perfect. And I think Post Malone was also a big Ozzy fan. And Ozzy, in turn, said, hey, I'm a big Post Malone fan. And so they did the collaboration. And it just turned out really well. And, if you're someone who's from the old Ozzy era and you just don't like this new stuff because it's not old Ozzy, I understand. But the truth of the matter is, when you have a new perspective, when you come in and you haven't listened to it, it's pretty darn good. Ozzy does a really, really good job of crossing over without going too out there, without being too outlandish and sticking to his original sound. Yeah. It's still Ozzy. Yeah. There's a lot of songs out there that you could just add an Ozzy chorus into and it'd be really good. I mean, I know many rappers that could just have all these rap lyrics over and just have an Ozzy chorus and the song would be phenomenal because Ozzy's Ozzy. That's just, it'll always be that way. So no, I agree with you. Ordinary Man's really a good one. For me, I had #4 at Diary of a Madman. I completely agree with everything you said about it earlier. It is kind of an album that does run together, but it is really well written. And I'll tell you what really saves it is Randy Rhoads' guitar play is so good. There is a lot of flaws with this album. There's a lot of flaws with the album. There really, really is. But because his guitar playing is just so darn good, I'm able to listen to the whole album and not get bored. I'm not saying there's a ton of bangers on it because there isn't. There's really only one banger, and that's Diary of a Madman. Other than that, it's just a lot of good songs. But however, because Randy Rhoads is there, because Ozzy is doing some of his peak songwriting form, I think, it ends up as a whole being good, being really good. And I think that the fact that this is where it gets tough because do you put an album that has 3 or 4 bangers over it, but some okay songs above an album that has 8 really good songs, but they're just all really good? There's no bangers maybe per se. It's tough. It's tough.
I kind of disagree with you on that in that there's no, that you think there's only the one banger. Okay, in my opinion, Over the Mountain, it's just
that's not a banger.
Are you kidding? That's an excellent song. And
it's an excellent song.
Flying High Again. Okay, what do you consider a banger? What's your definition of banger?
Okay, I'll tell you banger. This is good because banger is good for the audience too. When I say banger,
I don't know what banger is.
I'm talking. You go into a room, you put on the song, and everybody says, "Oh no, here we go!" And people are banging. I mean, people are stage diving over the couch, hopped up on God knows what. I mean, it's a song that you could listen to every single day until you die. It's just a near perfect song. It's a banger in every single way. And for Diary of a Madman, there's just not a lot of bangers per se. There's a lot of really, really good songs. And I'm like, yeah, this is really good. But songs I could throw on at a party and everyone would be like, oh, here we go. No, it would be like.
Depends on the party.
It depends on the party. But
my friend,
yeah.
You got 4 or 5 bangers on there, Ozzy. You keep pumping out 4 or 5 bangers per album. We're golden, brother. We're golden. I don't know what parties he's going to, but apparently they ain't Ozzy. Back in the day, Ozzy would light up a stadium and 450 billion people would show up.
However, I will say that Diary of a Madman, 4, 5, 6, it could be interchanged. if it was me personally and I was just going to throw on an album for some really good hard rock, I would probably throw on Down to Earth or Ordinary Man or one of his more recent albums opposed to that. But I understand what Diary of a Madman was, and I have respect for the history of it. That's why I put it a little higher. So, all right, number 3. So tell me your number 3.
My number 3
at this point. So this is big. So.
My number 3 is. It's an album that could easily bounce to 2 or 1. Mm-hmm. It's one of the albums that I listen to the most. It's Osmosis. Mm-hmm. That is just a great album from beginning to end. See You on the Other Side, Mighty Little Man, Old LA Tonight, of course, Perry Mason. It goes on and on and on. Right. That is just a rocking from point A to point B, turn any song on you want, and it's going to kick you. Yeah.
My number 3 as well is Osmosis. It's so good. It's so underrated. Every list. So he didn't look at list. I did. A lot of people had Osmosis at 8, 9, 7, 8, 9. Just in the later half of it. And, and again, what happens is, and I'll say it again, it's going to be said throughout this show so many times, but nostalgia plays a factor. If you grew up with Ozzy and you listen to that 80s Ozzy, you're always going to be chasing that 80s Ozzy. Can you go back to his original form? Osmosis is not his original form. It's 90s metal. And 90s metal, 9 Inch Nails, there's a lot of, you won't probably be familiar with 9 Inch Nails, but there's a lot of, inspiration he drew from that. He really adapted to the 90s metal well. The songs are just bangers from the time. The first half of that album is stuff that I could listen to every single day and just rock out to constantly. It's so good, and I think it's underappreciated just based on what I saw on the internet. It's extremely well written, and considering the album that came before it, which was No More Tears, it's just an advancement into, hey, this is the new Ozzy. I'm going to do what I want, and I'm going to do it well. And so, yeah, I know I agree with you. Osmosis is a fantastic album. I think it's criminally underrated.
Yeah, coming after No More Tears. No More Tears.
So tough.
Yeah.
So
tough. I thought, wow, and then to back it up with that was just amazing.
For sure. Yeah. All right. So number 2.
Let's go number 2. My number 2. My number 2 is going to be No Rest for the Wicked.
Okay.
I really liked that album.
Okay.
Crazy Babies, Breaking All the Rules. Of course, Fire in the Sky, one of my favorites.
Fire in the Sky is an absolute
I could listen to that over and over and over.
Yeah, for sure.
Hero, Miracle Man. It's another one of the albums that, where do you want it? 1, 2, 3. Yeah. It could be anywhere in the top 3 or 4 at any given time. So that's kind of the way I feel about that one.
And I had it 8, so that must have really cringed you when I said that.
No.
Yeah, I raised my eyebrows.
Well, your idea of bangers is a whole lot different than mine, but that's my ears have been banging for 30, 25 years longer than yours.
Yeah.
Huh? Yeah. They don't work as well because.
What's the audio quality you're listening to compared to me? No, I'm just kidding. All right. So number 2 for me is No More Tears. So No More Tears is a really masterpiece of an album. For me, this was the first time. So listen, another thing that makes us different here is that I'm kind of an audiophile. I'm pretty snobby about it, to be honest with you. I listen to lossless quality, and I usually use a $300 pair of headphones because I want to hear everything. I don't recommend it to anybody because once you start, you can't stop. Once you begin that and you realize what you're missing, it's really hard to go back. So I don't recommend it to anybody. However, this was the first album that Ozzy really brought in the bass, the bass player, the drums, and said, listen, I want you guys to stand out. Before this, it had been a lot of really, I'll just say it's piss poor drums and bass lines. When I listen to anything up until that point, and that would be Blizzard of Oz, Ultimate Sin, No Rest for the Wicked, Bark at the Moon, the drums and bass are almost irrelevant. You can't hear them because it's almost the same thing every single time. The audio tuning, like I said before, it was very guitar heavy. They really leaned into the guitar and said shred on the guitar. Everything else is just kind of background filler. No More Tears is the first album where you could tell a real music producer stepped in and said, listen, it's going to be stereo. You're going to hear the drums. You're going to hear the bass. You're going to hear all this stuff, and it's going to be a complete song, complete album. And it's just so well done. I don't know who the producer was. I don't know who he used, but it just really sounded
Let me apologize to all of the music producers from Blizzard of Oz, Madman, Bark at the Moon, Ultimate Sin, and No Rest for the Wicked.
Yeah.
Because he's not trying to insult anyone.
No. There's no insulting here.
Kind of being a dick. But anyway, okay.
No insulting here. But it's just when you listen to that album in Lossless, you really see an advancement, especially from the album before that was No Rest for the Wicked. And you see such a difference in like, wow, I can hear the drums, and the drums have their own part. It's not, you listen to
No More Tears has its own sound.
Period. It has its own sound.
And it really does. And it's so fluid. And I agree. You get, the sounds are fuller.
All the way. He had to reinvent himself. Even the album cover is different. Everything before was all kind of hell. I've got skulls behind me. I'm sitting in the devil's throne. Everything was really, Ultimate Sin has a demon on it. Everything's really, heavy metal. This one was like more of Ozzy. He has the long hair. He's got the little angel wing on the back. It was a portrait of himself. I think Ozzy really took a step back and really just made an album that was more self-reflective. The songwriting is gorgeous.
The album covers on those first 2 or 3, 4, he was called the Prince of Darkness for a reason, right. So.
And he lived up to it. They were very dark album covers. He always wore makeup, and it was like, Diary of a Madman. Everything had some symbol of evil to it. Darkness really played. And then this one was like he had an angel wing, and it was a small angel wing. So it had some kind of, it was just so perfect for what Ozzy needed at the time. He needed a reinvention. He did it so well. Mama, I'm Coming Home is just such a great song, completely different from what Ozzy was usually making. It was all 80s hair band, and now it was, he just really reinvented himself, and it's near perfect. It's really a great album. And from that point on, he really was able to approach new music, new metal with confidence, and it really showed. That's what makes him so great. So No More Tears is a near perfect album. I will listen to it front to back any day of the week you want me to.
I still do. So
yeah, absolutely. So all right, number 1 for you.
I just noticed that I believe mine and yours are both the same.
They're both the same, yeah.
And I wasn't sure where mine was going to end up.
Yeah.
But how can you rank it anywhere else, really?
It's hard to.
Blizzard of Oz.
Right.
What do you say? What can you? To me, it's the perfect. Debut album. His solo debut album with Randy Rhoads, who was just killer, and the songs are just. I don't know. That's one that is timeless. I think people will be listening to that till the end of time.
They will be, yeah.
And Crazy Train will be the mantra for a lot of different places, and it'll be on football scoreboard, at the football stadiums, baseball stadiums, and hockey stadiums, everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think that's forever.
Yeah, when you look at an album, think about what Ozzy had come from. He had just been fired. He had a lot of issues, some serious issues. Comes into his solo act, finds this guitar player, Randy Rhoads, who is just a young phenom, early 20s at this point, 22, 23, somewhere in there, and really takes the album and says, listen, I'm going to sing, you just shred on the guitar. The drums and bass, like I just said a few minutes ago, are so irrelevant, but it doesn't matter because the guitar playing and singing is so in touch with each other. It just needs background filler. It doesn't need anything else. It's so great, and how amazing of a guitar player he is, how he's able to pick up what the song needs. Again, Blizzard of Oz is my number 1 as well. Songs like Mr. Crowley. I think that if I had to pick one song to listen to all the time from Ozzy, Mr. Crowley is so good. It starts off with that organ, and then just, he says it. Mr. Crowley, and it just goes from the rip. Crazy Train is an absolute banger. It always will be. The guitar playing is phenomenal from front to back. It's a great album, and I think is it necessarily the best album as far as just front to back song wise I could listen to all the time? Maybe not. It's close, but maybe not. But when you think about the impact it had, you think about what he was coming off of, what he had to do, and how classic the album really is. It's just number one feels right. Number one.
I mean, to me, as you say, bangers. I don't know. Crazy Train, Goodbye to Romance, Suicide Solution, Mr. Crowley. Even Revelation Mother Earth.
Yeah.
I mean, that leaves two songs that I would consider great.
Yeah.
Just not your definition of bangers.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's a great song.
It's just like.
It's really well. I think Ozzy, and what's great about Ozzy's career, we'll talk about that in a second, but I think Ozzy's career really at the beginning, when he was trying to find himself, I think Randy Rhoads really helped guide that along the path. It's such good guitar.
I think.
Yeah, the guitar playing is just so good, and it might be underrated even. I mean, people think it's amazing, but I think it's underrated because, again, you can have a great guitarist, but there's a reason a band has 4 instruments. The fact to me that it's clear as, I mean, there are multiple tracks. Again, I'm listening in lossless, so I can hear everything really well. There's multiple tracks. The same beat on drums is used song to song. You can hear it. It's the same beat. It's the same beat, but it doesn't matter because Ozzy's voice and the guitar playing is just so out of this world that you never even notice. You wouldn't even care. And so that's really phenomenal how that came together. That album in particular just has so many amazing songs on it that it doesn't feel right putting it anywhere else other than one. It just really doesn't.
Yeah, well, I think it deserves the number one slot. I think it's that timeless album that I never get tired of listening to it.
Never.
I mean, it's just.
Never. I can imagine ever.
It's always something. Oh, road trip. Well, make sure you bring that out.
It's an essential. Yeah, it's an essential album. Yeah, because it just got too many bangers on it. I think. So what was the biggest? I mean, now that we have all these, I think it's a great list. I understand your frustration. It's hard.
Man,
yeah, it really is.
And if you don't think it's hard, sit down and do it. Sit down and just try to put them in order.
Yeah, don't just make a list because you listened to 10 years ago.
And really, don't look at everybody else's lists and say, oh, well, they said, no, you do it from your heart and see where your numbers come up. Because that's what I did, and it's a lot different than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, for sure. I think people are afraid to put some of these newer albums, but listen, the thing is, if you're an Ozzy fan and you're upset at these new albums, don't be. Go back and really listen to them with an open mind because they're fantastic. He's really done a good job of switching to new metal. The guitar player, Wild, has really grown. It's really good stuff. What was the biggest surprise? You being an Ozzy fan, being an Ozzy nut, what was the biggest surprise you had from listening to all these albums that you would say? What was the most memorable idea of it?
I think one of the things that surprised me the most was when I was listening to Ordinary Man.
Yeah.
How much I think I think he really was pondering on his mortality and things, and to me that's there's something that kind of hits home.
Yeah.
I'm in my late 50s and I'm not in the best of health, and I think about that too, and I think he's there. I mean, he's a lot older than I am.
Yeah, and he's pumped a lot more heroin into those.
Yeah. There's not been any in these, so. But anyway, I just the different sounds, because he can go from a ballad to just really rocking hard.
Yeah.
And you still know it's Ozzy every time. There's his voice is so unique. It's so different. There's nobody else that sounds like Ozzy.
Do you know what I discovered so this is going to sound like I'm actually taking a shot at Ozzy, but I'm really not, because there's a lot of artists. I know, yeah. No, there's actually a lot of artists who do this. Ozzy has an amazing singing voice. He's not a great singer. So the difference between the two is if you ask him to go multiple octaves, he can't. He probably can't. He probably can't hit too many notes. But because his voice is so beautiful, he can sing and he can sing. And it just works really well. And it'll always work because he has such a unique voice. And but if you ask the man to hit, I think, multiple octaves and stuff and multiple,
I understand what you're saying. You take some opera singer that can,
right.
Go 4 or 5 octaves wide or whatever, And
there's guys like, and here's the thing. So for example, there's a band, you won't know them probably, but some of our watchers may. Modest Mouse is a band that the main singer cannot sing. He cannot sing. He just has a voice that you just either love or you don't. And if you love him, he rocks. It really is a rocking sound. It's amazing. Can he actually sing? Well, no, he's awful. It sounds like regurgitated, vomit sometimes. But again, I love it. It's awesome stuff. It's really good. There's a lot of people like AC/DC. You can make a fine argument that they can't really sing, but they rock.
Are you kidding? Both AC/DC lead singers have been the best screamers in music.
Yeah, screamers, yeah.
But listen to how good it sounds.
It sounds good. It sounds good. And I'm not arguing that. It sounds great. The question is, would you call it singing? I don't know. That's hard. But it's not a shot. There's just some people who are that way. And there's a lot of artists who are that way. And it works. And Ozzy will always be Ozzy.
I believe uniqueness counts and goes a long way in the music industry.
All right, well, if you've made it this far, I really appreciate it. So does Chuck. We both appreciate you a ton. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day to listen to us and listen to us talk about music. If you have any ideas what you'd like to see in the future, please let us know in the comments. Please please subscribe. We plan to do a lot of stuff with pop media and pop culture, lists like this, kind of a roundtable debate format. We really enjoyed it, and so if you did too, please just let us know. We got more content coming for you soon. We really appreciate it, guys. You have a wonderful day. God bless.